Shalom and welcome to the ICEJ webinar series. I'm David Parsons, Senior Vice President and Spokesman for the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem. Welcome you again to our latest webinar. We took a break over our Feast of Tabernacles celebration, brought you some of the best of the feast briefings and teachings over the last couple weeks, and now we're back to a live broadcast and a briefing on the end of what we hope is the end of the 2 years of war in Gaza, and asking the question, is President Trump's comprehensive plan for Gaza good for Israel? Is Trump's Gaza plan, as they often say, is it good for the Jews here? Is it good for the Jewish state of Israel? And of course, we're talking about how in early October, President Donald Trump and his two main Middle East envoys, special envoys, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, suddenly they announced a deal, a new ceasefire and hostage release deal between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. Trump's 20-point plan that was signed on to by all these Arab and Muslim countries and European countries, others that have been very critical of Israel, really pressing Israel on a Palestinian state, on genocide, many other issues. Suddenly they're signing up to Trump's 20-point plan for Gaza. And so this marked a significant, a major diplomatic breakthrough for the Trump administration, which he's been looking for, wanting to build his peace credentials. And I think he's right in saying he's helped solve a lot of problems, probably deserves a Nobel Prize, hasn't gotten it yet. But this is a major breakthrough. This was a major breakthrough for Trump and his team in trying to find an end to this 2-year war in Gaza ever since Hamas, on that terrible day of October 7, 2 years ago, invaded the western Negev. Over 6,000 Palestinian terrorists, most of them armed, a few hundred looters among them, came over the border and just started slaughtering, raping, killing, maiming, mutilating. It was just the worst day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. And I think as we sort of get a reset now and answer the question, what just happened, it's important that we establish at this moment the narrative and of what this war was all about and what happened in it. And it all starts with Hamas launched a brutal surprise attack on innocent civilians, killed 1,200 Israelis and other nationals from other countries on that day, took 251 hostages, and Israel mobilized to repel this threat, and all of a sudden found itself fighting on 7 fronts against Iran and its proxy militias in the region: Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, West Bank, Lebanon, all these different fronts, Syria. And now things have finally calmed down. And when Trump proposed his 20-point plan, there were a lot of nations signing on to it and endorsing it, saying we're going to support this, but it was sort of just a map for a lot of things that needed to be decided later. And I don't think we need to make clear that the Israeli cabinet met. First, Prime Minister Netanyahu brought together his security, inner security cabinet, then the full cabinet, and they approved only the first phase of the Trump plan, and Hamas as well only approved the first phase. There's several phases of it. I think that's important to remember as we discuss these issues. And within 72 hours of Israel's approval of it and Hamas signing on, Hamas handed over the 20 living Israeli hostages still left in Gaza. This was an incredible day for Israel. You cannot play it down. The relief and the rejoicing in this nation was real. We here in Israel, we were in the middle of our Feast of Tabernacles. You could sense it, you could feel it. We were rejoicing with them. As cruel as Hamas is, somehow President Trump, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and everyone managed to get those last 20 living hostages here, back home. And the question that's, of course, since then, the dead hostages, there were 28. They've managed to get all but 8 of them out. So we're whittling that down, but it's taken a long time. It was all supposed to be done within 72 hours. Hamas is delaying. We'll talk about that. But, even after the 20 living hostages were released, you still had this sense in Israel, no one expected this war to last for 2 whole years. And you had ceasefire after ceasefire on different fronts, and it heated up again, and you went back to war. And so, people were really questioning here, can we trust this ceasefire? Is this war really over? How solid is this ceasefire? That's what we want to also answer today. And of course, this second question, is the Trump plan in Gaza good for Israel? And I think we've already heard a lot of people weighing in on this. There's a lot of good, solid supporters of Israel who see I think we can just describe it simply as many see the glass as half full, many see it as half empty. A lot of criticisms and concerns, I think rightly so, with this plan. We all expected a much more concrete and resounding victory for Israel. They've really won this, but the international community, and the question is, has the Trump team somehow helped rob Israel of that really resounding victory, that complete victory that we're hoping for after so much bloodshed and Israel taking it on the chin so many times from the international community? Israel deserved a thorough victory in this war. This plan may not give it, but I tend to see the glass as more half full. We'll go through this, why, and I think some good things have been accomplished. Of course, there are questions and concerns, but let's start trying to answer some of these. First of all, the war in Gaza itself turned out to be a long, slow grind. It was very frustrating for most Israelis. They know the Israeli army is this very capable army. We saw it with the way it swiftly, and in relation to Gaza especially, swiftly dealt with the much larger threat of Hezbollah in Lebanon, their threat to the north. Once that escalated about this time last year in October, November of 2024, within 2 months, Israel had decimated a much larger threat in Hezbollah, at least 5, probably 10 times the military strength of Hamas. It's all a matter of the tactics and the deviousness of the tunnels and things in Gaza. But Hezbollah suffered serious blows, and also Iran was humiliated, a serious setback to its nuclear program. And so how did Israel accomplish these much swifter victories against Hezbollah and Iran, but it's taken so long in Gaza? I think one of the things that's come out so far is that it was the Israeli military's intelligence branch, Amman, and the Mossad. They were in charge of all the intelligence and assessment and how to deal with the threats of Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the Iranian threat, especially the nuclear threat, the missile threat. And they had focused and spent a lot of time, a lot of resources concentrating on that and how to deal with them. The pager operation is an example that was being set up over many years, and they found the right moment. Incredible to see that happen. There'll be movies and books about it to come. But you had this slow grind in Gaza, And part of it, I think it's already coming out, this will be part of whatever inquiries, commission of inquiries has held here, is that the Shin Bet had basically told the Mossad and the Army intelligence, the Shin Bet is like Israel's FBI, it's domestic security agency, and because the Palestinian threat is so sort of internal in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, and in Gaza, the Shin Bet or Shabak, they had taken over the whole Palestinian portfolio, especially the threat from Hamas, and it turns out that they really misread what what Hamas's intentions were. There seemed to be this what they call the concept that Hamas was deterred. They were not ready to fight anymore. In May, there had been a short war with Islamic Jihad firing some rockets into Israel. Hamas did not join it. That was part of their deception. They also very cleverly started upping the number of terror attacks in Judea and Samaria ahead of the holidays, the fall holidays before October 7, 2023. And Israel actually moved a lot of troops that were guarding the Gaza border over to Judea and Samaria, over to the West Bank to try and help up the defenses there. And that was a ploy by Hamas that worked, and other reasons that Hamas was able to catch Israel by surprise. And the army itself, the IDF, under orders from the government to push it forward in Gaza, but the IDF itself took a slow pace to preserve the lives of soldiers and the lives of the hostages being held in these tunnels. You got urban warfare with a massive over 500 kilometers, 300 miles of tunnels, and all these hostages been hidden underground, and the IDF took it nice and slow and easy to try and save lives. And I think that was a big part of the frustration why Israel was sort of handicapped in this war with one arm tied behind its back. And this is going to be studied, and the inquiries will try and sort this out. The IDF has already done it, what happened on October 7 in the villages, but I think there's a whole question about whether the IDF was really pushing forward the way the government was ordering it to, and what was happening in that dynamic between the political and the military echelons. But eventually, after almost 2 years of fighting, I think Israel ran into what we call the law of diminishing returns. And for example, as we went into the fall, there were only 20 live hostages that were known. They had pretty good intelligence that this was the number of hostages still in Gaza. And you're calculating how many lives of soldiers, IDF soldiers, are you going to lose trying to go in and secure the release of these 20 living hostages, whether you were going to rescue them, find them, or whatever, or put enough military pressure that by going back into Gaza City under Operation Gideon's Chariots, phase 2 of it, this fall, they did put enough military pressure on Hamas, along with the diplomatic pressure they came under from the Arab and Muslim countries themselves, especially Qatar, that they did, Israel did help, the military did help secure the release of the hostages. But, I think part of why you have this law of diminishing returns, how many IDF soldiers are going to lose their lives. This has been the calculation since March, since the last prisoner exchange for hostages, that you only got 20 living hostages. How many soldiers are you willing to lose? They probably lost even more than 20 over these months trying to get those last 20 living hostages. And this is sort of it's not a nice calculation to make, have to make it, especially as leaders, but this is what the military and the government were wrestling with. And you also had, Israel had decimated Hamas's ranks as a military force. They say they destroyed 85% of Hamas's fighting capabilities, but that last 15 remaining percent, to whittle them down another 5%, 10%, was it worth the cost of all the criticism and condemnation and demonization that Israel was getting around the world, the damage to its interests, that to get another 5% of Hamas depleted, are you going to keep fighting on week after week while the whole world is charging you with genocide and all these blood libels and false accusations? And so I think that even Israeli leaders, when this plan was presented to them, I think that President Trump, somehow he managed to give Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu an exit ramp to get out of this conflict that was hard for Netanyahu and most of his government, especially the Likud party at the heart of it, and all the opposition parties that wanted these hostages back, by front end loading the release of all the living hostages. This made it hard for Netanyahu, and especially under pressure from the opposition parties who have a real say in it. And Netanyahu right now is left with a minority government. He doesn't have 61 seats in the government. And so, he has to calculate these things. How is he going to keep governing? And I think this was an offer from Trump that he couldn't refuse. And it was a game changer. The fact that this 20-point plan front-end loaded the release of all the living hostages on day one, when all the polls in Israel showed this was the main priority for the vast majority of Israelis, to get the living hostages back, even the dead ones. And it was a major concession by Hamas. For month after month, they had said, we're not going to release these last hostages until the IDF fully withdraws from Gaza, and we get a guarantee from the U.S. and the international community that this war is over. And to release them at the start of this deal, something happened, something changed in Hamas's calculations. And I think it was important that Netanyahu, as this 20-point plan developed, he was able to go in at the last minute, Ron Dermer, some of his other teams, and make some key changes to this comprehensive plan for Gaza, this phase plan that really works in his favor and made it more palatable for him and his government. And I think on the Arab and Muslim side, why they finally really started pressuring Hamas to release the hostages, I think they came to realize that all the suffering in Gaza that they were so worried about, the only way to end it is to press their thumb. It was their duty to spare the people of Gaza any more suffering, to bring a hard thumb down on Hamas and tell them to give up the hostages. And because it was clear by that point that Hamas was willing to fight on in Gaza to the last civilian in Gaza. All the Palestinians in Gaza, they did not care if every one of them died. They were going to, keep inflicting the pain of these hostages on Israel, the loss, the worry, the stress of it, the trauma. And so these Arab and Muslim countries finally said, that's enough, Hamas. You have to agree to this deal. So they agreed, both sides agreed to phase one of the deal. I think we need to realize that it's a phase plan. There are several phases to it. In this first phase that they agreed to, it's quite remarkable that Hamas agreed to this, but all the living hostages and the dead bodies were supposed to be returned within 72 hours in exchange for so many hundreds and hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. And the IDF was to pull back to the yellow line. And this was President Trump in the Knesset, who when he came and did a victory lap in the region and came to the Knesset, gave a speech, and really declared Israel the victor. We'll talk a little more about it. But here is the pullback line that Israel agreed to in this Trump plan. It's called the Yellow Line. Around Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, from the Rhodes Armistice Agreement of 1949, we have the Green Line. In northern Israel, the border with Lebanon, marked out by the UN, it's known as the Blue Line. I think on the Golan, the ceasefire line from the conflict between Israel and Syria is known as the Purple Line. And now in Gaza, we have the Yellow Line. Here it is. It's almost like a game of Twister. What dot do you put on here? We're using lines. But here, this yellow line is actually leaves 53% of Gaza in Israeli hands. This is very important. 47% right along the coast, from up here above Gaza City down. You see, if you're able to see it, there's a road here, the Saladin Highway. This is the ancient Via Maris. This is where in the New Testament Philip was talking to the Ethiopian eunuch on this road here near Gaza City, and then got translated somewhere else. So it's an ancient road, comes out at Rafah here at the Erez crossing in the north. But the IDF has almost got all the way to the Saladin Highway, which is the main north-south route in Gaza. They're looking at it from every position along the way that they can see all the traffic on this main thoroughfare for the whole of Gaza. And Hamas has managed, in their delay of the release of the dead bodies, they managed to come out in uniform once again with their masks and try and at least show like a police presence in most of the urban areas in Gaza City and in this part of Khan Yunis here in the center. And we have seen this, and we're saying, oh, Hamas is taking back control of Gaza. But we're going to look at this, about what in phase one, this pullback, how it could become the new status quo. Again, right now, Israel and Hamas only agreed to this first phase. So this is important to keep in mind. Phase two would call for an international stabilization force of mainly Arab and Muslim countries under U.S. and other forces helping advise. Egypt would contribute troops to it. Indonesia, Azerbaijan, these are countries that have shown a sort of a more friendly attitude towards Israel. Israel gets to decide who comes into this force and who doesn't. Right now they're vetoing Turkey's request. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the president of Turkey, a Muslim Brotherhood, a radical Islamist himself, he wants to put Turkish troops in. Israel needs to say no to them. But this stabilization force would be a temporary force in Gaza to help disarm Hamas and help keep the peace there. And in this phase two, as soon as we hit it, Hamas has to disarm, and they have to hand over control of Gaza to some sort of interim, temporary, technocratic cabinet, Palestinian figures, the old Salim Fayyads, who was like this Western approved prime minister for the Palestinian Authority for several years. He had worked for like the IMF or the World Bank, and everyone liked him. He was an accountant, a numbers cruncher, and they're looking for that type right now to sit on this provisional cabinet. That will be overseen by an international board of peace, an interesting idea and name. But where we sit right now, all of these, the stabilization force of Arab and Muslim forces, the technocratic cabinet, and this board of peace, they're all still in the embryonic stage. There's no nothing that's concrete yet and set. We don't, and it'll take some time to really finalize it. I know the U.S. has rushed ahead with what they call a control center. It's like a military control center down in Kiryat Gat, about 20 miles from Gaza, where they will oversee this second phase, and they've already put that in place in a big warehouse there, and it'll be important for monitoring and implementing phases 2 and 3. And in phase 3, the Palestinian Authority could be allowed to assume control of governing Gaza, but only once it completes reforms. There's no guarantee the Palestinian Authority will be in there, and so we'll have to see. There's no guarantee of a Palestinian state in this 20-point Trump's peace plan, comprehensive plan. It does talk about it. It may happen. The PA has to go through a reform process. We've seen this over and over, and somehow they always fail. You're depending on the Palestinians to make never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity, and we'll see what happens. But there's no guarantee the PA will be placed in control of Gaza under this plan. No guarantee of a Palestinian state. Prime Minister Netanyahu was able to go into the agreement right before it was released and make some of these changes. And the rebuilding of Gaza, very important, $50 billion at least needed there. They say it's going to use Arab war money. It's important whether it comes from the Saudis and the Emirates, who are going to be much more strict about how the money is used. They're not going to be like Qatar. If Qatar provides the money, it could be funneled right back to Hamas digging tunnels. This is the battle shaping up for the future of Gaza. But let's concentrate on our main question, but really two questions. Is this war really over? How solid is this ceasefire? And I would say it's fairly solid, especially because the U.S. wants it badly. This is a major foreign policy achievement, a major coup for President Trump and his administration, especially if it allows them to now go ahead in renewing momentum for the Abraham Accords, which is a wider sort of new paradigm in the Middle East, where a lot of the MAGA crowd is isolationist. They don't want America involved in the foreign entanglements, especially in forever wars in the Middle East. And this is the Abraham Accords are actually a way of the U.S. sort of backing a coalition of Israel and a lot of the more moderate Sunni Arab states like the Saudis, the Emirates. Let's put Egypt in that category, and Jordan, even though we have questions about their credentials for that. But they would form this new regional alliance that would be against Iran, against radical Islam. They're afraid of it themselves. And so this is step one in what the Trump administration is trying to achieve, where America doesn't have to be so involved if Israel and these moderate Sunni Arab states are cooperating to keep stability in the region. And that's the vision, and that could also help satisfy this really radical wing of the MAGA camp, like Steve Bannon, like Tucker Carlson, who really, they're showing their true colors in their anti-Semitism and their anti-Israel rhetoric right now, but this could help satisfy them. So, when we say that this is a major achievement and that President Trump and his team, they want to consolidate it, they want this ceasefire to work. We saw this when Trump came himself and spoke here in the Knesset, appearing and not only taking a victory lap, but also after he spoke in the Knesset, he went and met with some of the Arab leaders in the region to try and really show we want this deal to work. He then sent Vice President Vance a few days later. Then came Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The Pentagon Chief of Staff was supposed to come. There's intelligence chief coming. I think the Pentagon guy got delayed. But I think the top American intelligence chief is coming to the region. So they're sending one top senior Trump administration official after another. They're all visiting this control center in Kiryat Gat, signaling not only to Israel, but to Hamas, to the Arab and Muslim world, we're serious about making this work. And again, I think the MAGA camp that are anti-Israel, that wing of the MAGA camp who opposes forever wars in the Middle East, this is going to help satisfy them, hopefully, if we are able to get the momentum of the Abraham Accords going again. Who can complain against that? I think one of the reasons this ceasefire is, another reason it's pretty solid, is that it's going to be harder for an Israeli government, whether it's Netanyahu, whether they have the elections and all, once all the 20 living hostages were out. That number one goal for most Israelis of the war, it sort of narrowed down that was their top priority. Once those living hostages were brought out, it was a game changer, and it's going to be harder to get all those reservists to come back that you need to carry out the fight in Gaza if you want to renew the war and go after Hamas once and for all. You still have the tunnel threat, but you don't have the worry that you might cause the death of hostages. As you get closer, Hamas was threatening, and they did execute some of them. They might take some reservists and put them elsewhere on some of the other fronts and just send in the standing army right now. But it's harder for Israel as a whole to really gear up and mobilize one more time to finish off Hamas in Gaza. There's still, I think, enough consensus here, and Netanyahu as well, to go along with President Trump with this deal, and let's see how it works. I think Hamas is testing the limits of the ceasefire. There's a couple times that some of their guys have popped up from tunnels over on this side of the yellow line here in Israeli-held areas. There's still some guys down in these tunnels popping up, shooting. Hamas is saying, that's not us. We can't communicate with them. These are like some of the Japanese soldiers on some of the islands of the Pacific who years after World War II was over, they were still popping up out of caves and all and still didn't know the war was over. This is what Hamas is trying to tell us is the case, but I think they're communicating with them well, and this is testing what Israel will do when they send some of these Hamas terrorists up out of their tunnels, and they've managed to kill a couple soldiers. But Hamas, I think the ceasefire will prove stable because Hamas has lost its best leverage in the whole deal by giving up those live hostages, and the only 8 dead bodies left. Hopefully they keep coming. So I think the ceasefire is very solid, and it could turn out to be much like the ceasefire in Lebanon, which is a one-sided ceasefire. We've had it for about a year now. It was declared, I think, in mid or late November last fall, 2024, 1 year ago. But since then, Israel has been firing at Hezbollah for its violations every single day. They're killing about one Hezbollah operative a day, 300 and some killed since last year, when they see Hezbollah violating the terms of the ceasefire. And Hezbollah has not fired back, essentially, they haven't fired back once. And so it's a one-sided ceasefire. I don't think Hamas will let it be so one-sided. They might try to retaliate by terror attacks in Judea and Samaria and the West Bank, but this is probably, it'll be something similar to what we have in Lebanon, where it's a one-sided ceasefire in essence, basically, where Israel sees violations by Hamas. Even this morning, as I record this, reports of heavy IDF airstrikes in Khan Yunis area. And this is while there's a ceasefire. The war's it's not gonna reignite the war. It's already been tested several times, and the ceasefire is holding, but we'll see how it goes. Second question, and this is our main question for today: is this Trump plan, this 20-point peace plan, comprehensive peace plan for Gaza, is it good for Israel? And I think compared to where Israel was before the peace plan, I'd give it a qualified yes, that the glass is half full here. I think the IDF withdrawal, first of all, they got all the living hostages back. So far, that is a major, major achievement and has changed the dynamic. If the war does start back up, Israel no longer has to be concerned about those hostages and can go a little more full bore like we all were expecting. But as it is now, Israel has withdrawn to a yellow line that still allows them control of over half of Gaza and line of sight on the main north-south corridor, the main route in the middle, in the heart of Gaza, Saladin Highway, and that's a good strategic position for them to take. And any further withdrawals from this line, from the yellow line back to there's a red line and then a blue line later. There's some maps that show it, but we'll stick with this now. That if the International Stabilization Force gets deployed to Gaza and starts working, and if part of their job is to disarm Hamas, and the agreement calls for disarming Hamas in phase 2, then what Netanyahu was able to do was to go in and condition any Israeli withdrawal, not just on the entry of this stabilization force, but the disarming of Hamas. And it basically says that any Israeli withdrawals will only be equal to the degree that Hamas is disarmed. You have to see real disarmament of Hamas giving up weapons before you can start expecting Israel to move from this yellow line. And we've seen, and it's especially important, that Israel still controls Rafah, the Rafah crossing. If you remember, for months and months, Egypt, once Israel took control of this crossing, because this was the main smuggling route for weapons into Gaza, and the whole world said, Israel, don't go into Rafah, it's dangerous, you're committing war crimes, all of this nonsense. That once Israel was in this area, the Philadelphia corridor, and control of Rafah crossing, the main crossing for goods and trucks and all, they cut off Hamas's main route for rearming. And so what we have to realize, this yellow line where Israel is now and doesn't have to move until Hamas disarms, was agreed to by the Arab and Muslim countries when they signed on to this 20-point peace plan. They agreed to Israel sitting on this line, still in control. It wasn't a full withdrawal demanded. Israel still in over half of Gaza, has the main north-south road in its sight, has this area where most of the weapons were coming in. They got it blocked off and still in control of it with the approval of the Arab and Muslim states. And so phase 2, there's going to be lots of twists and turns, but I think strategically Israel is in a fairly good position. And this is going to be a debate as we go forward. There's going to be a lot of pressure to start the rebuilding process in Gaza, all the destruction and all. And the question is, will the rebuilding only go on in the parts of Gaza held by Israel, or taken over by the International Stabilization Force? or will there be rebuilding in the areas still controlled by Hamas, and especially if they're not disarmed? Israel is going to insist no rebuilding there. They're not going to let in any heavy equipment, any rebuilding material. I think this is a major battle that we will be looking. It'll be a PR battle. Israel, you want to block the rebuilding of Gaza? Yes, if Hamas is still in control of that area. And that's why I think this is part of the glass being half full. Israel has a real say in what parts of Gaza get rebuilt right now. And Israel also can approve the members, the troops that are contributed to this interim stabilization force. And so these are fairly good terms for Israel, accepted by the Arab and Muslim countries, by the rest of the international community. And this, what we may be looking at, this yellow line, if Hamas refuses to disarm, this may be the new line between Israel and Hamas, between Israel and Gaza, for years to come. This may be the new status quo, and if it is, Israel's in a really commanding position, I believe. Hamas is, they may not disarm, but they can't get new arms. It makes it harder for them to do that. They'll certainly look for ways. Hamas has been slow to turn over the last dead hostages because that is part of phase one. And as soon as phase one is over, phase two kicks in, and this is the stabilization force. It means Hamas has to disarm. It means this interim government has to come into place, and Hamas has to hand over control of Gaza to this interim technocratic government under this International Board of Peace. So Hamas is not so happy to get to phase two yet. They approved phase one, giving up the hostages. That's amazing. But phase two basically means not only are they to have to be disarmed, they have to give up their weapons, but their tunnels have to be destroyed. Israel would work with the stabilization force and the other countries involved to destroy all these underground tunnels Hamas has. Hamas is going to try and cheat. They're going to try and survive and reassert control in Gaza. We're already seeing that. But whether they are still the de facto governing or the official government of Gaza, we'll have to see. They may look to Hezbollah as a model. For many years, Hezbollah was not really officially in the government, but they sort of de facto controlled the country because they had a much larger militia, much stronger militia than the Lebanese army itself, and they sort of dictated from outside the government Lebanese policies and eventually joined the government. The Hamas may say we're going to give up our arms and try and become part of the Palestinian Authority, which would make it even less palatable to Israel and to the U.S. and others if Hamas is part of, that's not reforming the Palestinian Authority when you're letting the Hamas in. So Hamas has some real tough questions ahead. They probably will survive at some level, in some form, as a militia, having a say in Palestinian affairs. But right now they're sort of in a tough spot, I believe, because they've given up all the hostages. That was their best leverage. The agreement now says they got to give up the last dead hostages and start disarming and giving control of Gaza over. Those are going to be tough things for them to do. I think the key going forward is just how strong the Arab and Muslim countries who have signed on to this deal, how strong are they going to be in continuing to pressure Hamas consistently that it has to disarm and give up control of Gaza. I think some of these countries, their fear of radical Islam, what Hamas represents, an armed militia trying to take over territory and claim it for radical Islam. Egypt has its problem with the Muslim Brotherhood. The Saudis don't like it, the Emirates, And so if they would put the right pressure, I think Jordan also, the monarchy there fears the Muslim Brotherhood, the radical Palestinian element in their country, and how much pressure they're going to put on Hamas is going to be a key question to watch. What happens with Qatar? Who were really funders and giving of Hamas and giving shelter to their leaders in Doha. I think they finally started leaning hard on Hamas after, first of all, after Iran fired a missile. It was a couple missiles at them. There was no real damage. They even gave pre-warning and said at such a time we're going to hit some area in the open desert. Don't worry about it, but we got to retaliate to save face. And then the IDF struck the Hamas leadership while they were meeting there in Doha in the capital. Of course, it did not kill the top leaders like Israel wanted, but I think that strike still put a fear in Qatar that they themselves were being drawn into this conflict, that Qatar had gotten hit within a few weeks from both sides, and that their own rule in their own country was at stake. So they started leaning on Hamas to give up these hostages. And twice now, when these Palestinian terrorists came up out of these tunnels here near Khan Yunis and Rafah and shot some Israeli soldiers, fired an RPG rocket-propelled grenade and all, Qatar condemned it as a violation of the ceasefire by the Palestinian side. They didn't necessarily name Hamas, but they said this was a violation by the Palestinians of this ceasefire. I think that's very important. One of these times, a top Qatari official said it at a forum of the Council on Foreign Relations in Washington, some meeting there, thinking they're talking to the people who control the world and all this CFR, but it's important to note that. Meanwhile, Erdogan in Turkey, he could really prove a spoiler. He's as strident as ever against Israel. I think he has a personal vendetta against Netanyahu, calls him a war criminal, wants to see him hung. Bibi was recently hung in effigy from a crane in Turkey, and he's incited the whole Muslim Brotherhood, his party. He is Muslim Brotherhood, radical Islam. He's incited against Israel. And I think it's important that Turkey wants in Gaza. They want to be part of this stabilization force. It would be destabilizing to let them in. And under the terms of this agreement, Israel has to agree whether they go in or not. So far, they're insisting no Turkish troops. I think it makes it complicated for NATO that, if Israel has to attack Turkey or respond to some provocation by Turkey, Turkey's part of NATO, and an attack on Turkey would be all the NATO countries have to come to their defense. So it's too complicated and too sensitive. I think Turkey will try and be a spoiler in some way in all this. Sort of taking Iran's place as a major adversary against Israel in the region. We have to monitor that. But I think in the long run, this whole deal, we're only in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, lots of twists and turns ahead. Overall, I think it's good for Israel, but it's left Israel and even Netanyahu very dependent on President Donald Trump. The question is he going to sell out Israel at some point? Many of us worry about it because of all the Arab wealth and power on the other side that is trying to tell Trump to sell out Israel, create a Palestinian state. Will Trump cave to this? And so far in his first term and so far in his second, Donald Trump has an unmatched record, a pro-Israel record, a strong record towards Israel. We don't want to have to name recognizing Jerusalem as the capital, all the things he's done, recognizing sovereignty over the Golan. We could go on cutting off any U.S. funding to the Palestinian Authority. And in his Knesset speech, President Trump, he started at first by acknowledging the victory came from the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That was pretty astounding for a U.S. president to give credit to the Creator God, the God of the Bible, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Israel, for Israel coming through this 2-year war with a victory. And at the end, I think it was probably the most telling thing he said right near the end. He just simply said, I want y'all to know I love Israel. I think this is a sentiment that he has. We need to be praying as Christians who love Israel that both sentiments, acknowledging the God of Israel in this spiritual battle that's trying to destroy Israel, and this sentiment in Trump's heart that he has a certain affection for Israel. We need to pray that these prevail each and every time Trump is faced with every time he's faced with this temptation to sell out Israel, especially on Palestinian state. We will have a major moment in just a few weeks. On November 18th, President Trump is scheduled to host the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, in the Oval Office in the White House. That's only a couple weeks away. And the whole question of whether the Saudis are going to require a firm, definite roadmap to a Palestinian state in order to normalize relations with Israel and become part of the Abraham Accords. This is going to be on the line there. So we're going to see where Trump goes in all this. He wants the Saudis in the Abraham Accords. I think there are sensitive negotiations going on right now between Netanyahu, the Trump administration, and the Saudis about this, and we'll see how it plays out and how serious is the Saudi demand for a Palestinian state. President Trump was just asked about it on 60 Minutes, and he said he doesn't think they're as serious as they're saying, that they'll go ahead and normalize relations, join the Abraham Accords without definitely requiring a firm roadmap and timetable for a Palestinian state. We'll see if he's right. He said it earlier, and the Saudi Foreign Ministry at 4 a.m., once they heard that in Washington with the time difference, they sent out a statement at 4 in the morning saying that's not true. We want a Palestinian state. We'll see how this plays out. But that's basically where we stand now at the as this war in Gaza has wound down to this, I think, fairly stable ceasefire. Lots of twists and turns ahead. We all need to keep watching these issues we've been talking about. But we just want to bless you from Jerusalem. Hope you've enjoyed this latest session of the ICEJ webinar series. God bless you from Jerusalem.
Thank you for joining us today. Join us again next Thursday at 3 p.m. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on our social media platforms for more exclusive ICEJ content.